And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's daily tune in. It is Wednesday, December 15th, and it's a pretty exciting day. So I'm going to jump right in because I feel like there's a lot to cover. And I'm probably going to hit on the weird a little bit. And the weird is the part of us that is, if you look up the definition of weird, there's always, I think it's the second definition, that is the supernatural part of us. So weird in this respect, whenever I refer to weird, it's not unbelievable weird. It's not, don't look at it weird. This is the supernatural part of who we are as a multidimensional being, not actively, but actively maneuvering in a physical world. We are multi-dimensional beings. Therefore, we have a part of us that is supernatural, that is created in the essence, in the likeness of Source Creator. So we're going to go into some depths of the daily tune in today that I typically don't go too far in, but I think it's really important to cover on a day like today because the energies on the Schumann resonance are very much in alignment with this conversation. So this is what's sparking the conversation, and I'm going to go into it a little bit more, okay? So let's take a look at some of what's happening. As we know, we're coming up on the winter solstice. I've talked about it for, I think, probably the last week's worth of daily tune-ins. But the solstice is the end of our solar cycle, where we are energetically in relative to frequency, is where we start our new solar year, which then takes us into 2022 and is the starting point, is the foundational frequency that we build on going into our entire next year in linear time. With that said, a lot of times we are called into the busyness of life. We get into fear and overwhelm and anxiety and busyness at this time of year, which puts us in a lower frequency of resonance, so that we constantly are ending the solar cycle in a chaotic and overwhelming resonance. But when we are consciously working through these energies and understanding what's happening, we can then be in conscious, higher frequency, higher consciousness, in order to not have the outer world dictate how we begin the foundational resonance of our next year. On top of that, being where we are in the most, it's not one of, this is the most transformational time in human history and in the history of our planet. This deliberate rise in consciousness is activated from the planetary, happens every 26,000 years. So this is like a major thing that many people don't know about yet. And the fact that we are tuning into that transformation here on the Daily Tune-In, we are the activators of this transformation. We are the carriers of it. We are the pioneers of it. We are the ones that spread the word, because it's not going to be spread on the nightly news. It's not in the highest interest of the nightly news to let everybody know that the greatest transformation of consciousness is happening, because the higher our consciousness goes collectively, the more we see the deception and manipulation that is actually being permeated and penetrated by or spread by the nightly news. So we are the ones that are tuning into this, and we are the ones that are modeling what is happening by being in tuned with the energies at hand. So I want to break down some of the things that are happening. We see some evidence of it on the Schumann resonance, and I really want to go into kind of the deeper levels of spiritual world that we're talking about, the higher frequencies of who we are, the higher essences of who we are. That is the soul frequencies of us, okay? So on the Schumann resonance, you'll see that there's these these blasts. These are blasts that are coming down all the way down into these higher frequencies. So up here is really the denser aspects of us. So the densities that are within us that are in the fear-based levels of emotional densities. These are the densities within our physical bodies that are being purged out, that cause us to have, many people have to have some pain, to have things erupting in their bodies that have been silent for a while. These are also the upper density or the lower densities of what we're seeing planetarily. So, this is all the lower frequencies and the denser parts of life as we know it. The further down we go into this darker space down here, and this void space down here, these are the higher frequencies, our higher consciousness, our soul frequencies, and the higher frequencies of the fifth dimensional aspect and expression of our planet, as well as us. So remember, this is a reflection. The Schumann resonance is a reflection of Earth's heartbeat, what's going on with the Earth and the energies coming in. And also, it's a projection of what is happening within us, because what happens to the Earth energetically happens to us. So these big blasts that are coming down here are blasts of photonic light that permeate all aspects of us, from the denser parts of us all the way down into the emotional. This midway is it's the emotional frequencies of us, the energetic self of who we are. It's hitting into our energetics, and it's coming all the way down into the higher frequencies, the soul frequencies of who we are. So when we get the blasts like this, and this one is hard to see, but there's like 3 right in a row. So the way that I have been, kind of taught or explained it to myself or by higher beings, is that it's kind of like these are zaps of light that permeate all through us. And as it's recalibrating our circuitry, because our nervous systems, everything's having to come up in frequency. So it's kind of like, it's like sparking, it's jolting us in that moment to kind of like jolt our frequency up into the higher levels quickly. These jolts are in our favor, and yet, just like if you were to get, put your finger in a plug, the jolt would shock you, and it would have some effects as your body then calibrated to it and kind of regulated itself. So when we get these massive jolts, they are there to help us, and yet we will have some purging from that. We will have to purge the density that was kind of taken out, or I always say cauterized, like that was cauterized from it. So whether you physically have to purge in some way, throwing up, diarrhea, sweating it out is very common. Emotionally, many people will purge it out emotionally, where it'll kind of intensify any anxiety that you might have, anything you're worried about, any relationships that have been challenged or are challenging might kind of be triggered, and those densities are going to be working themselves out between the two of you. Anything that is dense or challenging in your life is probably going to be triggered, because it's a call then to take care of it. The more we are jolted into the higher frequencies, the more we cannot resonate with those circumstances, with those people, with those health issues, with our bodily issues, with the emotional challenges that we might be carrying around. Those higher frequencies of our true essence cannot hang on to those denser things. So right now, because we've had these big jolts, you might be feeling a lot of discomfort at the moment, and that's okay, as long as you are consciously navigating through that discomfort. The other thing that's interesting too, I'm going to pull up here, is that 7.8 frequency. I didn't do the screenshot far enough, but up here is this kind of fuzzy line. That is where the Earth has been resonating. Therefore, the collectiveness has been resonating at that 7.8 hertz for millennia. That's because we as a collective resonate with the planetary vibration, and that's where Earth has been. But because since 2012 we've come into this photonic belt, the Earth's frequency has been rising, 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 rising. That's why we've seen a lot of dismantling of many things, of the purging. A lot of us have had a lot of changes in our lives since 2012. If you start putting it together, you'll start to see that there's a correlation between when the Earth's frequency started to rise and when lives started to change, when our planetary started to change. But what we're seeing is, you see this line here? This is about at 10 hertz. So this is showing us that there is enough of a collective consciousness that is resonating at a higher frequency at that 10 hertz. Now that's still it's still dense. So these are the ones that are starting to wake up, that are starting to kind of putting things together. You may have already had a spiritual awakening, have been on the healing pathway since maybe 2012 or maybe sooner, but really it started to activate many, many people in 2012 on. So those of us who have been on this healing journey might be in these. There's another one. This one's at about, which one was that one? I think it was, I wrote it in an Instagram post. I can't remember what hertz this was, and I don't want to say it incorrectly, but you can see that there's a collective that is in a higher frequency now, and they're resonating together. So now there's this band of the collective that is in this higher frequency, that's operating, more in the heart based, in the fourth dimensional aspect of life. And then you have a thin line, so you can barely see it, but there is a collective consciousness now that's moving into those higher frequencies, getting closer to that 5D frequency. And these are the ones now that are starting to create into the fifth dimensional aspects of life, the patterns of perfection. What that means is the patterns of perfection is your heart-based patterns, the parts of you that are of true essence, the true expression of who you are. So the true expression of who you are is made in the image of likeness of source, God, nature, spirit. And that pattern is the truth of who you are. It's the truth of who everyone is. But how we are raised, how we are taught in our collective, how we accept, paradigms that are not in resonance with the truth of who we are and the truth of the great spirit itself, we start to then take on these densities, and we start to then kind of pull away and become ego personalities that are not at all in resonance with the patterns of perfection of who we are. But because of this great awakening, because of this rise in consciousness, you can see more and more people, I just timed out, more and more people are starting to come up in frequency, which means they're getting closer as the purging continues, the emotional and physical purging of all the densities that are kind of like filters. They're filters from who we truly are. And those patterns of perfection are being activated with those big jolts. And once those pattern of perfections are lit up, then it's kind of like, I can't go back and be this person that accepted this particular, person in my life that no longer resonates. I can no longer accept, jobs that are out of alignment or out of resonance with who I am anymore. The things that you were able to just kind of deal with are becoming more and more painful and are having to be stripped away. And we are being helped with that. We are being helped and aided with higher consciousnesses of light that are helping to deliberately spark these jolts into us to help the collective come alive. And if you are still not in the belief of that, we know that there is a higher consciousness of darkness that has permeated into our global systems, into our global planetary consciousness, that then manifests itself into physical form in the form of people and organizations that work from a place of manipulation and deception and mistruths that are all generated and created for the power to be artificial for some at the expense of most. There is an opposite expression of that. There is a higher consciousness of being, of light, which is God, creator, source, spirit, whatever you want to call it, that permeates down into physical form, into beings, into a consciousness of light that helps from all around us, from our galactic friends on to physical form, that have physical expressions here on earth that are helping to aid this beautiful transformation that we're in. So there's these two polar opposites of consciousness that are doing the work. And what we know is one person doing the work from those higher frequencies of love or above can counteract 750,000 people that are operating in the lower frequencies of that third dimensional denser world. So as this rises, this is much more powerful than this side of the dark side, so to speak, to use like the dark side and the light side. That's really going on. But I'm trying to bring it into words that we can understand in like normal, realistic words. So there's the consciousness that creates the light consciousness and the dark consciousness, and that feels lights of massive triggers of light coming on, of knowledge, of wisdom, of insights. So that is happening. That has happened in the last few hours, in the last couple, but not always in the way that we were like, oh, I got triggered and I wanted to punch someone in the face. It could be that you've been triggered into new insights and new awareness of, I'm no longer going to accept that in my life anymore. I am no longer going to say yes to this. I am now going to stand in my truth, because now you're going to start operating from those patterns of perfection, which is the true operating system of you. And as you get to that point, it brings us back to what we've been talking about all week, is the 0 point. And as you can see, there's this black line right here. And this is a paradigm shift. There is something in your life that all of a sudden you're going to have that 0 point moment where you're going to say, because this is energetically, right? So anything that happens on the shooting, it's going to follow up. And this is the energy part of it. It's going to follow up in the physical in some way in your life in the next few days, in the next few weeks. So as you consciously navigate this, keep in mind, okay, I have a paradigm shift coming. I have something that has been triggered that I'm going to face. And like we've been talking about for the last 2 days on the daily tune-ins, that is the convergence point where the new you, the pattern of perfection, meets the physical, and your heart is going to be the portal. And if it doesn't resonate anymore, that's where you're going to choose whether you act from the higher realms of the patterns of perfection of your true essence, or you resort back to old patterns because maybe you haven't found the courage yet to act from this other place. However that comes, okay, I'm going to do it differently this time, because you want to take that momentum, the patterns of perfection. Connection is unstable. You want to take your new pattern of perfection into 22 so you can continue to keep building on that. I know this has been a lot. Hi, Tatiana and Trish. Good morning. Good morning. Weird, one of my favorite saying these days. Yeah, everything feels weird, right? You just go out for a walk some days, and my husband and I are like, does it just kind of feel weird? It's just weird. Heart palpitations have been crazy. Yes, that's because, remember, as these big jolts come in, it is like the recircuitry. That's not a word. Our circuitry is kind of getting an upgrade. That means our energetic self, which is the heart portal, is the center of our energetic being. So that is, you can imagine it going whoa, 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 as it expands, or if it feels something that's a discomfort or it worries you. However, it is something, mine especially too, when I do these kind of things, or I've been doing a lot when I'm in that completely connected into that energetic world, I come out and my heart tense, and yet It is a part of us growing and expanding into higher frequencies. All parts of us are having to get used to and start to resonate at a higher level. My body was literally buzzing and vibrating during the night. Yeah. And you can see those jolts of energy that came in on the Schumann just looking at. That's been happening the last couple of days. So as we get these jolts, are like everything has to like calibrate. It's kind of, throwing a big rock or a boulder into a pond, like that thing's going to be going like a while. So we've got to start to come down and resonate. And once we resonate, we are then at that higher level. Once we ground and calibrate to those higher frequencies, then we are operating at a higher level, which is why anything that we brought with us that is denser at a lower frequency is way too painful at this point. Like we can't even like deal with it. We're just like, and it just gets easier to deal with it the higher we come. So there's a lot happening, and it's all being deliberately charged to us in these next few days to get us really ready to start this new solar cycle after the solstice. So expect a lot of really highly charged energies for the next few days. Just roll with it, be the bobber on top of the waves and just watch it go by and breathe through it, take care of yourself, do whatever you need to take care of you so that you can be in the highest of consciousness through all of this. It's a really interesting process. I love it. It's been the most difficult thing that I have ever gone through. This year I've gone through some stuff, but this year has just been a walloping of growth, and it's been fascinating to watch it, to see what's happening on the Schumann, to observe what's happening in my body, to observe what's happening out with you guys and kind of making these connections. So it's like one of the most, beautiful times to be alive. It really is when we're aware of what's happening and how massive this transformation is, and we get to consciously understand it and participate in it, and quite frankly be pioneers of it when majority of the world doesn't even know it's happening, and we get to walk through this in this way. It's an honor, but it's also hard. But if for those who don't know what's going on, imagine what life would be like. It can be very scary. It can be challenging. So that is up to us to just pave the way, to show how to work through this, share this experience as best you can and in the words that that will understand, so that they can kind of just start to open up to it and expand into the fact that this is all happening in our favor. Even though it could look a little bit chaotic, it is all happening in our favor. Okay, I am in love with my healing journey. I love that, Trish. There are days where I'm like, I'm in love with my healing journey, and there are days where I'm like, man, can I go back? But you can't, right? We can't go back because we would never. I couldn't operate in that world that I used to operate in anymore. It would be too painful. It was painful back then when I didn't know anything about it, but now, knowing what I know, there's no way. Thank you all. This is a little bit longer of a DTI, but I really wanted to get into what's happening on the Schumann because it's a perfect visual of what we are navigating right now. So thanks for being here, all of you. I'm super excited, and I'll be back tomorrow, and looking forward to it. Make sure you come by the Ascension Bank where we are here in a little bit. I'm going to be going live for our wealth code conversation, and we're going to be taking this information and diving deeper into how it affects our wealth codes and our healthy codes of abundance and higher frequencies of health, wealth, and well-being in our lives. So if you're not in the Ascension Bank, I'd like to invite you to come over and check us out because we're doing some really cool things, a lot of stuff in the archives for you to tap into. And we're doing some good stuff there. I will see you all on the next Daily Tune In. Mwah! Have a good one.